Our next speaker is Jennifer Roberts from the University of Maryland. Jennifer is an assistant professor of kinesiology, and she focuses on the impact of built social and natural environments, including the instructional and structural inequities of these environments on the public health outcomes of marginalized communities. So welcome, Jennifer.
Thank you, Jason. I am so thrilled to be speaking with all of you here today at this very first Campus Nature RX Symposium. I'm going to actually say our annual because I'm hoping John can make this maybe an annual kind of event, but he doesn't know I just said that until just now. Today I'm going to be talking about Nature RX at UMD. I thought I would kind of just discuss pretty much the origination of the program, the launch, some of the roadblocks we've come across, as well as our future goals. So in terms of the origination of the program, I just figured I would kind of just plainly just start with overall just the inception of the ideal. The birth of Nature RX is kind of an interesting story in the sense that I and my co-director, my Nature RX co-director, Dr. Shannon Jetty, we were invited to go to a Prince George's County Park RX kickoff event. So the University of Maryland is located in Prince George's County. And so we were invited to go to this event. It really was just kind of this celebratory luncheon, just celebrating the new partnership between the Department of Parks and Recreation in Prince George's County with the Park RX initiative. And Dr. Robert Czar was there to kick off the event, and he gave a wonderful talk. The luncheon was great. And so kind of just in between my cookie eating after the talk, just kind of casually chatting with Robert and Shannon, we kind of came up with this ideal of starting a Nature RX program at the University of Maryland. And I believe Robert has a personal connection to the university because I believe it's his mother's alma mater. So we were chatting, and John Henderson, who is executive director of Park RX, he suggested that I speak with Dr. Don Rakow. So I chatted with him later on that month. We had a wonderful chat about how he started the program at Cornell, and I just thought that was so awesome. And I pretty much said, I just want to copy your entire program for the University of Maryland. But it was a great chat. I think we were on the phone for like close to an hour. We talked about our Maryland connections, and I just became so excited from such an innocent idol that started at a luncheon with me eating cookies. So now I'm like, this is something we could actually start at Maryland. So then Shannon and I, we met again with Robert later on in the summer, and we started kind of thinking about more details of the program, and it just became more and more of an excitement. Like, I think this is something we can do. We didn't meet kayaking, but I just thought this was a cool picture of Robert. But he did want to meet in a walking meeting outdoors. And so it was just kind of nice that we were kind of like walking the talk as well as meeting. So later on, by August, when the semester started, we had our first steering committee meeting. There was nearly 20 attendees from all over the university. It was from folks from our University Health Center, our Recwell program, landscape architecture, the Arboretum and Botanical Gardens, the UMD Arboretum, as well as the dean from my School of Public Health. And there were actually some local residents in Maryland who came to this meeting. And it was really exciting because I thought maybe we were going to have a handful of people, and we actually, had such a crowded room. So we actually launched the program, and our goal was to launch it Earth Day, and we were pushing that year, and we finally did get it launched on Earth Day of 2019. So what is Nature RX at UMD? It obviously, it was born out of the Park RX America initiative. And as I'm sure you all are aware of, this nonprofit organization's mission to decrease, the burden of chronic disease and increase health and happiness, foster, environmental stewardship, and just pretty much prescribing nature in an effort to do all that. So again, the leadership of the program is myself, Shannon, and in our second year, we actually brought on a coordinator, one of my former students who had just graduated from the Department of Kinesiology, which is where Shannon and I are. She said she was really interested in this, and subsequently, Michaela is now, a first-year MLA student, and so it was kind of a nice, kind of organic way things came about in terms of us leading this. And so when we met on our first steering committee meetings, we started kind of thinking about, what we wanted to do, our goals, and as well as the mission in terms of how we thought this program should be, how we thought it should be a way to really highlight the beauty and the landscape of our campus arboretum, as well as the other recreational spaces, and how those spaces can be used as a healing space for our students, our faculty, as well as our staff. So after a series of meetings, again, we launched it April, or Earth Day of 2019 and April 22nd. And we had a series of activities on that day. So we started off with the morning outdoor yoga, which was really nice. We had an afternoon Qigong session. I had never done that, and that was really nice. And that was actually led by Patrick Smith. So he was one of our neighborhood residents who just heard about our initiative and said he wanted to work with us, be on the steering committee. And so he led the Qigong in the afternoon. We also had a climb and clean event, which basically, students, they sign up to help clean the creek that's in the on the southern part of the campus. And then after cleaning, they're able to do some free rock climbing in our rock climbing wall, as well as get some pizza. Later on, or actually the next day, we had a park run, which is part of an ongoing initiative, a park run. We have our College Park run. Folks meet every Saturday and go running or walking or however much you want to do in terms of your physical activity. But it's like an ongoing kind of initiative. And so they kind of let us kind of tag on with that. And then finally, there was the Wellness in the Woods Park RX Day that occurred that following Sunday. So with our launch, we were also able to finally put up our website as well as get some other visibility through social media. So we also have our map, which is on our website. And this was really instrumental because we wanted to make sure that we had it so that people could understand either on campus, around the campus, adjacent to the campus, where the actual places that they could go to. And so this is actually on the website, but it can be used no matter if you're on campus or not. And so it was really important that we get this on our actual website on the launch day. We've also been having some other activities that we have been doing throughout the year. I mean, we're still pretty much a really baby organization, about a year and a half long. A year and a half old. So we've had some events where we've had a fall harvest volunteers. So students and faculty and whomever would come volunteer in our School of Public Health garden. And then we're able to harvest some fruits and vegetables afterwards. We also attended a Greenbelt Health Fair. You can see that in that picture with Michaela and I. Greenbelt is actually just a neighboring small town adjacent to College Park. And somehow they heard about Nature Arcs at UMD and invited us to come to their fair, which was great because, more and more people were asking how they could get involved and, asking about some of the greenery and the green spaces and the parks nearby. We've had other opportunities where we go every week and we have a table set up at our UMD Farmers Market. And I'll bring that up a little bit later because that will be probably instrumental for how we move to one of our goals of actually prescribing prescriptions. So we have, in our short year and a half since we launched, we've run into some roadblocks. And I like to focus first on some of the roadblocks that are related to some of the existing priorities. These priorities, I focus because it has to do with our college, student healthcare workers who really have their plates really, really full. And this was before the pandemic. And so we wanted to really start, with the nature prescriptions after the launch, but there was just some challenges incorporating these prescriptions into the existing medical delivery system, given all of the other responsibilities that these healthcare workers had. Also, the healthcare center was, experiencing kind of a pileup of these time-sensitive treatment requirements. There was colds and flus that were spiking during that season, and then there was also a turnover in the health center that was leaving some holes in the actual staff. So we realized that we had to kind of wait, pretty much not wait until our turn, but more or less wait our turn before they could actually really focus on being able to figure out how they could actually deliver these nature prescriptions within the existing system. A survey, though, was taken, and actually some of the concerns that were brought up by not only the healthcare workers, the UMD healthcare workers, but also the students, was the issue with safety while engaging in nature on or near campus. And I wanted to talk about the fact that, the crime rate of College Park is pretty much considerably higher than the national average across all communities in the U.S. And while this crime rate is mostly driven by property crime, there's still some violent crimes that are of concern. And as you can see from the map where, College Park is, we're flanked by two areas that have pretty high crime rates. And so that is a concern that we do want to really take into consideration. And then obviously there was the pandemic. And so that pretty much derailed all of our spring as well as our fall events. And we were, I was kind of disappointed because we actually had several events, planned for last spring. And one of them was actually a forest bathing event. And so we had to realize that, we have to figure out, you have to kind of be nimble. And yet, again, as I said, going to the first issue, this addition of the pandemic added another priority to the UMD healthcare providers. So moving on to some of the goals that I kind of wanted to focus on, I wanted to actually highlight this article on the right-hand side, A Dose of Nature, because this article was written to highlight some of the research by Dr. Naomi Sachs, who was actually a postdoc of Dr. Ray Kyle. And I was so excited when I found out she was going to join us from Cornell. And she's really been instrumental in helping us, launch and just push Nature RX. But I'm kind of going to focus on the goals in three different ways. First, again, as I was talking about the actual prescriptions, this has been a hurdle that we've been working on. But as an alternative, we were kind of thinking about, focusing possibly on the peers program. And this peers program would be an idea where we could actually cross-train student peers on the materials as well as the research that they could then share at the farmers markets that we were going to when we were in session. And this could be used as kind of a pilot in terms of being able to have peers start to write the prescriptions. So kind of circumventing the whole idea of using the actual official healthcare workers, but having the peers as an option for writing prescriptions. In regard to the RX education, that's another goal of we want to kind of create an undergraduate Nature RX class for incoming freshmen and introduce it to them during the orientation. For other students who are there on maybe an upper level, we also want to have an I-Series course. And that I-Series is probably it's a signature program that we have at the University of Maryland. It's really kind of a type of course that's supposed to be kind of more contemporary. It looks at, current events, kind of is something that wrestles big questions, I should say, and examines ways that they can be examined from very many different disciplines. And then finally, in regard to research, actually, Shannon, Michaela, and I, we do have a paper that we have that will be published this January. And this paper is something that we wanted to do more than just kind of talking about Nature RX at UMD and how we came about with the whole idea. But what we did in the paper, we kind of guided through the prose of one of my favorite esteemed novelists and naturalist, Alice Walker. We kind of walk through this article by outlining kind of the growing body of literature and research demonstrating the health benefits of human interaction with green environments, and overall the impetus for the launch of our Nature RX program. So that will be published in January, the American Journal of Health Promotion. Another aspect is some of the ongoing, collaborations that I have with other folks who have interested and shared commitment to nature and health. One of which is a collaboration with Nature and Health Group at the University of Washington. We literally just had like one meeting, our very first meeting last week. But I'm really excited about this because it's hoping to kind of create this alliance for communities and disciplines to really just recognize the importance of aligning these similar organizations with this kind of shared commitment to nature. And then finally, right before COVID hit, I was able to squeeze in one presentation to talk about our Nature RX program at the Active Living Conference in Florida. And I was really excited because more so, not so much that I was sharing about what we did, but I was excited because I came across so many people who were interested in starting additional similar programs at their campuses. And so just kind of the growth of this is something that really made me very, very excited. So now I want to pivot to this issue in terms of equity because while it was not necessarily discussed in many of the steering committee meetings that we had, it's something that will definitely be the foundation of this Nature RX at UMD program. And I really do love how Dr. Kondo had touched upon this earlier this morning in terms of issues with equity, diversity, and inclusion. So again, as was mentioned, as you probably do understand and know, in the United States, people of color, they live in places with less immediate access to nature than white people. There was a report that was literally just out very recently by the Center for American Progress, as well as the Hispanic Access Foundation, and it found that communities of color were almost 3 times more likely than white communities to live in nature-deprived areas. So those are pretty much areas that have no access to parks, no access to paths, no green spaces. And the whole ideal of the historical racism in our housing practices, in our city planning and institutions has really much shaped this pattern that we see today. Cities have invested very heavily in improving the type A type of neighborhoods. When you look at the redlining by planting trees, building parks, and pretty much, beautifying, whereas the areas that were outlined red, were very much neglected. And I kind of wanted to show as an example. So I'm from Buffalo, New York, and I was able to find this homeowners loan corporation security map of Buffalo, New York from 1937. And it's interesting because when you look at this map, obviously you see the red areas, which were pretty much, occupied by African Americans or what they deemed Negroes at the time, or poor immigrant whites. And what is interesting when you look at this map, again, as I said, the A's or the green and the blue areas where they planted the trees and they pretty much did all the beautifying. When you look at it, you see right here, which is called Delaware Park today, but at the time it was called Country Park or Paradise, and it was landscaped by the father of landscape architecture, Frederick Law Olmsted. And it's interesting when you see this park exactly where, the areas where they wanted to beautify it. And I read somewhere that, when Olmsted came to visit Buffalo, he said that because the way Buffalo was designed, it shouldn't just have like one park, like the Central Park in New York, but have multiple parks. And today there's many of those parks and they're all clustered in the areas that were again blue and green. And then, so the other aspect in terms of equity that I really want to also focus on is this whole ideal of this issue of privilege. And again, as was mentioned earlier, this was highlighted by the incident with Christian Cooper earlier this May. This incident really highlighted issues of the structural racism, the exclusion, the white privilege, and how all these issues intersect with nature connectedness and health equity. And with this, I felt, I was compelled to actually write a story of my own, or not a story, an essay of my own, and really wanting to convey that everyone needs to understand how these decades of systematically structured racism have stripped away not only the green space access for many people of color, but have also like alienated communities from nature through these false narratives about the rights and privileges to these spaces. And so this finally brings me to the final point in terms of connectedness. And again, I do acknowledge, that it's very understandable that that very older generations have historical anxieties about going to certain areas of nature, as there was a fear that bad things would happen, and they in fact did. And it's interesting because I think just last week or the week before, there was a new PBS documentary that came out called Driving While Black: Race, Space, and Mobility in America. And it talked about how so many African Americans favored driving on highways instead of the beautiful country roads because they felt safer, which makes sense because those country roads were the areas where there were lynchings, other, less deadly forms of harassment happened in those country road spaces. And so it's really interesting when you understand that, there's still that fear there. But, when I think about younger generations, I think about this whole ideal of debunking these stereotypes, in terms of the stereotypes of, people of color not wanting to have a connection to green space. And I look at some of the research from Dr. Dorsetta Taylor at the University of Michigan. And she has seen in her research that students of all backgrounds express a deep connection to the outdoors. And specifically, African Americans score very highly in her research, on wild landscapes. And it really contrasts this whole stereotype of only relating to these urban sceneries. And so the other thing is, I want to acknowledge kind of just the intrinsic connection that people of color have with nature. And so just as an example, one of my heroes is Harriet Tubman. And, she understood the environment and the wildlife, and she used it to communicate and navigate, free slaves, and survive. And so understanding that there is an intrinsic nature. And so it's something that we should really, understand that we are a part of it, and we have just as much right to be connected and enjoy nature as anyone else. So I say all that because one of my goals for NatureRx is really helping UMD students understand and understand that the greater community, and realize that nature is for everyone. So before I end, I want to acknowledge this is a list of people I probably did meet or not meet, forget some folks, but all these folks really were instrumental with their efforts in helping to launch NatureRx. And I know they'll still continue working to, continue to grow the initiative. And so I just wanted to acknowledge them and give them a big thank you. And I think that is it. Thank you for your attention.
Great. Thank you so much, Jennifer. I see some Zoom claps going up across the board. I just wanted to mention to everybody that on the website for the Campus Nature RX network, there is a resource compiled by Don Rackow and Laura Brown, Anti-Racism in the Outdoors, Resources Related to Inclusion, Diversity, Equity, and Access of Black, Indigenous, and People of Color in Parks and Green Spaces. So that's available right on the front page of the website, and that's there for people. We're also getting several questions about access to the slides of the presenters. We are going to see if we can make all these slide decks available on the website. So we'll talk to our webmaster people about that and try to make that happen. We had a question, Jennifer, about how are you going in the programs that you're starting. How are you doing outreach so that the students know that these programs exist, and what sort of outreach are you doing to the community around the institution?
Well, for the community, we did have a series of events we were going to go to in terms of the health fair. So another nearby community is Bowie, Maryland. But kind of creating these partnerships in terms of nearby community agencies, kind of just going and giving little mini presentations of like, hey, here we are. That again, was pre-COVID. And so we're kind of trying to get back on our feet, trying to figure out new angles, whether it's a Zoom meeting or just, little small types of meetings so that people can understand, or not even understand, know that we exist. Same thing for students. We've incorporated, where people will announce it, that NatureRx is in existence in their respective courses. A lot of word of mouth, the website. But that's one of the things that we're kind of still struggling with, trying to figure out how to make sure we increase our visibility and that students know that, it is a program that is existing. But I think, we're getting there slowly, not as fast as I would like, but we're getting there, little by little.
Great, thank you. I'm just scanning the chat here, looking for questions. So we have, it says, I love the concept of doing NatureRx with incoming freshmen as part of their orientation. Can you talk a little bit more about this?
Yeah, I like to get them early, as I say. And so if I can get them in early, then they can start to become some of my soldiers to help. So the whole ideal is you get them to take the class. First, you get them in the orientation to be like, yeah, this class is going to be awesome. Then you get them to take the class, and then they have this buy-in, and then they start to create. So the group, the idea was also for them to create these student kind of groups, so that when they're sophomores, they can come back to the class and be like, hey, this was so awesome, and to kind of create this kind of avalanche, or not an avalanche, but this cascade in terms of students who have taken the class, create groups, and then kind of form these kind of other entities. Because the whole ideal is I don't want NatureRx to be likened to just me. I want it to be a student organization. I want it to be something where they're like, wait, who is Jennifer? Oh yeah, okay, whatever. I want it to be such a living organization that it goes beyond me. And so getting them early in a class, and this class, and we were saying how, because sometimes it's very difficult to get classes in general education, but even if we, before that process, to kind of start having guest lectures in their existing general education classes, that's a lot easier to do. But definitely the freshman year, to get them in early so that we can have their buy-in and then use them as our soldiers to keep perpetuating the energy of the organization.
Great, thank you. We have a question on kind of your thoughts on the organization Outdoor Afro as in its outreach and its goal of making safe places for African Americans and getting into nature.
Yeah, I love having these types of kinds of organizations. I actually, it's funny because I had recommended this organization. I had given a guest lecture last week. Wait, what's today? No, I'm sorry, it was this week, to some students at UCLA. And one student, African-American student, she was saying how she never has anyone to go hiking with. Sometimes she wants to go by herself. And I was like, please don't do that. Because I'm like, I don't want you to, I believe safety in numbers. And so I was saying, organizations like this, which you can link up with people, who are interested in doing this, find a safe space, find safe practices for getting out in nature, is so much more important than doing it in isolation. So having these type of organizations, Outdoor Afro, I think there's another one just for African-American women, I can't remember the name of it, but these kind of organizations that can really kind of help also debunk these kinds of ideals that it's always unsafe. I get it. It can be unsafe. I've even had issues where I've gone by myself, and it was issues intersecting with discrimination, issues where I didn't know if it was discrimination. I didn't know if it was an issue of me being a woman, but I do that visceral kind of unsafe feeling, but I don't want to always just be like, okay, I'm just not going to go out. I know there's ways that we can get people together, and even kind of how Dr. Kondo was saying, rebranding nature. It's not, doesn't always have to be scary, especially if we have, we do it in groups, we do it in safe ways. And so these kind of organizations, I think, can help teach these kinds of these practices for being safe. And there's another organization I know in the UK, because that's another thing. I forgot the name of it. I'll put in the chat when I, remember it. But it's another organization where they're getting folks of color who live in the UK, kind of re-emerging them in nature and realizing that, you know, it can be safe, it can be fun.